So, good afternoon, everyone. Our report will be the computer-assisted audit tools and techniques. So, if I'm not mistaken, my last recent report, I actually mentioned this. So, I will just give you a short recap about it. So, yung computer-assisted audit tools and technique, isa siyang practice ng paggamit ng computers para maging modern yung IT audit process natin. So, this usually includes office software such as spreadsheets, word processors, and text editing programs, and mga advanced software na ginagamitan ng statistical analysis. So, this is very useful to collect, analyze, interpret, and present data that will benefit both auditors and its management. So this is the overview of our report. So we have the description of application controls. This is the input controls, processing controls, and output controls. We also have black box and white box. Next is we have the 5 CAATT approaches used for testing application logic. So the test data method: base case system evaluation, tracing, integrated test facility, and parallel simulation. So let's now first go to application controls. So application controls are program procedures designed to deal with potential exposures that threaten specific applications. So yung application control ay isa siyang form of security that is designed para ma-improve yung quality ng mga data for input into a database. It also blocks and restricts unauthorized applications or data para maiwasan na malagay yung data natin at risk. So, application controls falls into 3 broad categories. So, this is the input controls, processing controls, and output controls. Let's first discuss input controls. Input controls. So, input controls at this stage are designed to ensure that these transactions are valid, accurate, and complete. So, yung input control daw ay isa siyang computer control na din-design to provide reasonable assurance na yung transactions natin ay properly authorized bago siya ma-process ng computer. Na accurate yung data, na recorded siya sa computer, and to make sure that the data and transactions are not lost, duplicated, or manipulated. So, data input procedures can be either source document triggered or batch input. So source document input. This requires human involvement and is prone to clerical errors. Dealing with these problems may require tracking the transaction back to its source. So yung source document input, this requires human involvement nga and is prone to clerical errors. Clerical errors means errors made by clerks. There are some errors sa source documents na hindi na-detect or na-correct during the data input. So to deal with these problems, we sometimes require na bumalik sa starting point ng transaction to correct what's wrong. Direct input employs real-time editing techniques to identify and correct errors immediately, thus significantly reducing the number of errors that enter the system. So yung direct input is kind of like a computer approach, so this uses a real-time editing techniques for us to identify and correct some mistakes. This helps with reducing the number of errors na pumapasok sa system natin. Okay, so we have 6 classes of input control. So we have the source document controls, the data coding controls, the batch controls, and for some reason I didn't put it there, the validation controls, the input errors correction, and generalized data input system. Let's first discuss source document controls. Source document controls, careful control must be exercised over physical source documents and systems that use them to initiate transaction. Source document fraud can be used to remove assets from the organization. So, so this is the use of physical source document to use them for transaction purposes. So source document fraud, this is when someone removes assets from the organization. For example, if someone who has an access with the purchase orders or receiving reports, kaya nilang i-forge or like gumawa ng purchase transactions to a non-existent supplier. And pag ito mga documents na to napunta sa data processing, the system might mistakenly take these documents as a legitimate transaction. So without controls na makakatulong sa atin, the system will make a payment. Hence the fraud. Okay. So source document controls. Okay, so yun, to control against this type of exposures, the organization must implement control procedures over source documents to account for each document. So we have first is use pre-numbered source documents. So source documents should come pre-numbered from the printer with a unique sequential number on each document. Source document numbers permit accurate accounting of documents usage and provide an from audit from tracing transaction through accounting records. So sinasabi dyan na yung source document ay dapat pre-numbered now with a unique number on each document. So when using the pre-numbering source document control and technique, we can assure that all transactions are recorded and accounted for. So this is very helpful para ma-prevent yung recording ng same transaction twice as there shouldn't be any duplicate numbers sa system. Kasi nga dapat unique lang siya. So with proper numbering of documentation, pag magte-trace tayo ng documents to follow up queries or questions ng customers or owners, it will be easier to trace. It will be easier to comply than ng financial records for like tax returns and stuff. Next is use source documents in sequence. Source documents should be distributed to the owners and used in sequence. This requires that adequate physical security be maintained over the source document inventory at the user site. So yung sinasabi lang dyan ay yung source documents dapat distributed sa users at ginagamit in sequence, meaning may pagkasunod-sunod. Yung paggamit nito ay nagre-require ng physical security to assure that the source document ay secured. So pag hindi ginagamit, it should be locked away and you can only access the source documents if you are an authorized person. Next is the periodically audit source documents. So reconciling document sequence numbers should identify missing source documents. So periodically, the auditor should compare the numbers of documents used to date with those remaining in inventory plus those avoided due to errors. So the whole point with the last one is dapat from time to time yung mga auditors nagko-compare sila ng numbers of documents sa remaining na nasa inventory pa, tsaka yung mga na-void dahil sa errors. So the documents that are not accounted for dapat i-report sa management. Okay. Next is data coding controls. So, yung data coding controls, ito yung coding controls are checks on the integrity of data codes used in processing. So we have three types of error that can corrupt data codes and cause processing errors. So this is the that is the transcription error, single and multiple transposition errors. Let's first move to transcription errors. So we have three transcription errors. The addition errors, the truncation errors, and substitution errors. So, yung addition errors occurs when an extra digit or character is added to the code. So, yun, pretty easy naman to understand. Nangyayari yung addition errors pagka nagkakaroon ng extra digit or character sa code natin. So, for example, yung meron tayong inventory item number na 83276, nare-record siya as 832766. So, that is an addition error. Kasi yun nga, yung dulo, as you can see, meron siyang extra digit. Next is truncation errors. So, this occurs when a digit or character is removed from the end of a code. So, sa error naman ito, kung gagamitin natin yung same inventory item, yung 83276, pagka nagkaroon ng truncation error, nare-record lang siya as 8327. So, kulang siya ng number sa dulo. So, that is the truncation errors. Substitution errors are the replacement of one digit in a code with another. So, with the same example, the 83276, pag na-record siya as 83266, so nagkaroon ng substitution ng number sa like second to the last. Instead na 76 yung dulo, naging 66. So, na-substitute siya. So, that is the substitution errors. Next is, so merong two types of transposition errors, and that is the single transposition error and the multiple transposition error. So, yung single transposition error naman, nag-a-appear naman siya pagka yung dalawang magkatabi na digit ay na-reverse. So, yung example natin kanina na 83276, pag bigla siyang na-record ng 38276, ibig sabihin nun, merong single transposition error kasi yung 8 at 3 nagkabaliktad sila ng position. Yung multiple transposition error naman, nag-occur naman ito pagka like hindi magkatabi yung numbers. So, for example, 83276, na-record siya as 87236. So, as you can see, nagkabaliktad ng position yung 3 tsaka yung 7. So, instead na 83276, na-record siya as 87236. So, that is the multiple transposition errors. Ayan, so, this is like to avoid the transcription errors. So, first is check digits. So, a check digit is a control digit added to the code when it is originally assigned that allows the integrity of the code to be established during subsequent processing. So, yung check digits ay isang digit na dinadagdag sa dulo ng ng code number. So, this is also a form of redundancy check na ginagamit for error detection sa mga identification number katulad ng bank accounts. So, the simplest form of check digits is to sum the digits in the code and use the sum as the check digit. So, let me explain that. So, meron tayong customer code na 5372. Para, to do the simplest form of check digit, ipa-plus lang yan lahat. So, that is 5 plus 3 plus 7 plus 2. And that would be 17. So, yung 17 yung parang calculated natin na check digit. Ang next naman is, nagagawin natin is i-drop natin yung check digit natin by tens. So, ang matitira na lang is 7. So, yung 7 na yun na yung i-add sa original code natin. So, yung bago natin yung customer account number is now 53727. Ayan. So, during data entry, the system can recalculate the check digit to ensure that the code is correct. So, this technique will detect only transcription error. So, for example, meron tayong substitution error na nangyari. So, pag ginamit natin yung above, yung code, yung example kanina na 53727, tapos na-record siya as 52727. Pag kinalculate mo yun, pag sinam mo siya lahat, hindi na 7 yung lalabas, kundi 6 na. So, yun, madidetect na may error siya. However, this technique would fail to identify transposition errors. Siyempre, yung transposition errors, nag-iiba lang naman siya ng pwesto. So, pagka, for example, yung 53727, pagka like bigla siyang na-record as 35727, nagkabaliktad lang naman yung 2 tsaka 5. Pag pinag-plus mo siya, same pa rin yung makukuha mong check digit. So, hindi siya madedetect. Next is modulus 11. So, yung modulus 11, isa to sa parang pinakang popular na check digit technique. So, let's have the code, yung code natin kanina na 5372. Ngayon, ang gagawin natin una is assigned weights. So, yung each digit na yan, i-multiply natin siya sa different weight. So, sa example natin dito, ginamit natin na weight is 5, 4, 3, and 2. So, yun, ipag each digit lang, i-multiply mo lang siya sa weight niya. So, 5 times 5, 3 times 4, 7 times 3, 2 times 2, ayan. And then, pag nakuha mo na yung total ng each pag nakuha mo yung ang total nito, ipagpa-plus mo naman siya lahat. So, yan. So, magiging 25 plus 12 plus 21 plus 4. So, magiging 62. Ang next naman natin na gagawin is divide by the modulus. So, since na gumagamit tayo ng modulus 11, 11 yung gagamitin natin. So, yung total natin kanina na 62, i-divide siya sa 11. So, ang magiging sagot is 5 with a remainder of 7. Tapos, the next step is subtract the remainder from the modulus to obtain the check digit. So, ang gagawin lang dyan is yung isusubtract yung modulus, ay yung remainder na 7 sa 11. So, 11 minus 7, that would be 4. So, yun. The last step, syempre, is i-add mo na yung check digit na yun sa original code. So, yung kaninang code mo na 5372, magiging 53724 na siya. Ayan. So, pag nag-calculate naman tayo at ginamit naman natin yung modulus 11, makikita niya naman na yung transposition error kasi pag nagkabaliktad sila, hindi lang 4 yung pwedeng lumabas, but it could be more than that. It could be a different number. So, madedetect yan. Next is batch control. So, batch controls, hold up. Batch controls are an effective method of managing high volumes of transaction yan, data through a system. So, the objective of batch control is to reconcile output produced by the system with the input originally entered into the system. So, ayan. So, yun nga, na nakakatulong siya sa manage ng mga high volume transaction data sa system. So, this is the management of documents that have been grouped. Tapos, waiting na lang sila for processing. So, yun, it provides assurance na lahat ng records sa batch ay mapaprocess. Tapos, walang records na mado-double process or like more than once mapaprocess. At yung audit trail of transaction ay ginagawa sa input hanggang processing at hanggang output stage ng system. So, ayun. So, this requires grouping ng mga parehas na input transactions. Tapos, per batch sila. Tapos, i-control yung said batches na yun sa data processing. So, we have two documents that are used to accomplish this task. A batch transmittal sheet and a batch control log. So, this is an example of batch transmittal sheet. So, ito yung parang components niya. So, we have a unique batch number. This one. And then, a batch date. Of course, that's important. A transaction code. This one. So, makakatulong siya para malaman mo kung ano ba yung type ng transaction na yun, pinaprocess mo. Next is the number of records in a batch. That is the record count, kung ilan yung records sa isang batch. So, 50. Tapos, next is the total dollar value of financial field. So, ito siya. Yung halaga niya, ganun. And then, the total unique non-financial field naman. So, non-financial field, ito yung hash total. Okay. Let's go. Okay. So, ito naman yung batch control process. Okay. Let me paki-follow yung mouse. Okay. So, sa example natin ngayon, yung batch transmittal sheet is prepared siya by user department. Pero, just to put it out there, yung batch transmittal sheet, pwede din siyang ma-prepare by the data control clerk tsaka ng data processing department. Pero sa example natin ngayon, yung user department yung nag-prepare. So, yun, after ma-prepare ng user department yun, isasubmit yon sa data control along with the batch of source documents. This. Okay. Where am I? Okay. So, yeah, okay. So, the data control clerk receives transactions from users assembled in batches of 40 to 50 records. And then, yung clerk, mag-a-assign siya ng each batch, ng unique number. Dito na yan. Yes. Unique number, tapos mag-date stamp siya ng documents, and then, ika-calculate niya yung batch control numbers. Katulad ng total dollar amount or ng hash total. And then, after nun, yung clerk, ilalagay niya na sa batch control information yung lalagay niya na sa batch control information yung mga documents sa batch control log. Tapos, isasubmit na yung batch of isasubmit niya na yung batch of documents along with the transmittal sheet papunta sa data entry department. There. Tapos, sa data entry naman, ina-enter nila yung mga yung transmittal sheet data sa transaction file. So, kasama din dyan yung batch of transaction records. Yung transmittal data naman, this may be added as an additional record in the file or placed in the file's internal trailer label. Yung transmittal sheet, pwede siyang maging batch control record and ginagamit siya para sa assessment ng integrity of the batch during processing. Okay, so for example, yung data procedure, i-recalculate nila yung batch control total para i-make sure na yung batch ba is balanced. So, for example, tingin tayo sa batch control log. Sa transmittal record, nakalagay doon na meron tayong 50 sales orders records. Tapos, na meron siyang total na dollar value na 122,100,000 plus. And then, meron din siyang hash total na, ayang amount. So, yung mga amounts na yan, i-recalculate yan, tsaka i-compare sa original na batch control record. So, after nun, after nila mag-recalculate, pag same amount naman, ibig sabihin, balance yung batch. So, walang error or walang problem. But then, if it showed a mismatch, then, makikita na, may madedetect silang error or problem. So, after processing yung output result, babalik na siya sa data control clerk para sa reconciliation tsaka distribution ng users. Tapos yung clerk, i-update niya yung batch control log na na-process niya na completely, successfully na yung processing. So, ito. Yan. Okay. Hash totals. The term hash total refers to a simple yan, control technique that uses non-financial data to keep track of the records in a batch. Sorry. So, this is a method for ensuring that data in a file have not been altered. So, yung hash total ay para siyang numerical summation ng isa or higit pa na number sa file. So, example, yung sales order number natin sa isang enter batch is ito. So, para makuha natin yung hash total, ipagpa-plus natin lahat ng sales order number. And then, yung total, yun yung hash total natin. Ganun lang siya kadali. So, yung hash total, ayun, explain ko lang ulit. Nire-recalculate siya tsaka kino-compare sa original. Yun, if may nawala na dito or may nabago, magkakaroon ng mismatch, which means may error. Ayun lang naman siya. Validation controls. So, validation controls. Input validation controls are intended to detect errors in transaction data before the data are processed. So, validation procedures are most effective when they are performed as close to the source of the transaction as possible. However, depending on the type of technology in use, input validation may occur at several points in the system. So, yung validation control, this helps us ensure that bad data does not make its way into a software system. So, ayun, yun nakakatulong siya para makadetect ng error sa transaction data bago pa siya ma-process. So, example, sa ibang validation procedure, nagre-require sila na gumawa ng reference gamit yung master file. Yung system either where am I? Ayun, so yung system na gumagamit ng real-time processing or yung batch processing na may direct access sa master file, they can validate data sa input stage. Ayan. So, ayun, pagka like, gagawa ka ng reference against sa current master file, parang ito yun. So, ito yung validation in a real-time system, tapos ito naman yung batch direct access system. Okay. So, okay. So, pagka yung system, gumagamit siya ng batch processing na may sequential files, yung transaction records na being validated, dapat ma-sort muna siya the same way or the same order katulad ng master file. So, yung validity at the data input stage in this case may require considerable additional process. So, as you can see here, ayan, pag magbabalidate tayo ng data, tapos mag-create tayo ng transaction file, and then yung transaction file, parang mauulit lang siya yung process. And then, gagawa ka ng reference gamit yung master file, and then mag-update ka, and then uulit siya ulit. So, ayun, yun yung ibig sabihin when it says here na it may require considerable additional process. Oh, okay. So we have 3 levels of input validation controls. So we have first field interrogation, second record interrogation, third file interrogation. Okay. First is field interrogation. So, yung field interrogation involves program procedures that examine the characteristics of the field. Yun lang siya. So, we have seven seven types. So that is the missing data checks, numeric alphabetic data check, zero value checks, limit checks, range checks, validity checks, and check digits. So first, let's go to missing data check. Missing data checks are used to examine the contents of a field for the presence of blank spaces. So, yung sa pagkakaintindi ko dyan, parang ginagamit naman to for the examination ng contents ng field for the process of blank spaces. Yung programming language kasi parang limited lang yung justification niya ng mga data. So, if may nakita siya na data na like blanco or like hindi maayos na na-justify, it could create some problem or like pwedeng yung ma-mistake niya to as an error, ganun. Ayun, so there are some cases na pagka merong blank spaces sa mga dapat may nakalagay na numeric data, pwede siyang mag-cause ng system failure. Ayun, so when the validation program detects a blank na dapat meron talagang nakalagay na data doon, then mag-i-interpret siya na may error. Next is numeric alphabetic data checks. Determine whether the correct form of data is in a field. So, parang ano lang yan eh. Like, for example, sa field, dapat ang nakalagay doon is account number. Pero meron nakalagay doon na alphabetic data. May nakalagay doon na alphabetic data. So, pag ganun, hindi siya, like, mahirapan yung system na ma-detect na, like, intindihin ba kung ano yung nakalagay doon. So, pwede siyang mag-cause ng processing errors. So, if numeric lang dapat yung nakalagay sa field, dapat numerical lang. And if alphabetical naman, dapat alphabetical lang. Or it could be both. Basta parang masa-specify mo naman. Yung zero value checks are used to verify that certain fields are filled with zero. Okay, yung zero value checks naman, parang ang pagkakaintindi ko dyan, like ginagamit siya para ma-verify na yung fields ay may laman na zero. So, etong control na to, pwede siyang makatrigger ng automatic corrective control pag na-detect niya na may non-zero value sa field. Pinapalitan niya yung content ng zero mismo. Okay, sorry. Okay, next is limit checks. Determine if the value in the field exceeds an unauthorized limit. So, ayun nga, like for example, may policy ka na bawal mag-exceed ng 44 hours per week yung mga employee mo. Then, para ma-check mo kung may naka-exceed na ba or what, something similar, i-check mo yung payroll system kung, yun nga, kung pag merong greater than 44 hours, then you can interrogate the hours work field sa weekly payroll records. Ayan. Next is range checks. Assign upper and lower limits to acceptable data values. Parang similar to sa isa ko pang report last time. So, bali magkakaroon ka lang ng upper and lower limit. Ganun. So, for example, meron kang sa firm mo, ang pinapasweldo mo is 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 per day. Ganun. So, i-check mo lahat ng payroll records kung yung range ba is nandun pa rin siya sa line ng parang acceptable data. Kung for example, may nag-exceed ng 2,000, so you have to, detect mo siya. Like, dapat you have to ask or you have to investigate why does that happen when ang available data value mo lang naman na inallow is 1,500 to 2,000. This is just an example. Next is validity checks. Compares actual values in a field against known acceptable values. Um, ah. So, ayun, parang ano lang siya, i-compare mo lang yung value sa field against sa acceptable values mo. Ganon. So, for example, yung i-verify mo ba yung transaction codes, yung state abbreviations, or yung employee job skill codes. So, pagka yung field hindi siya nag-match sa acceptable values mo, ibig sabihin na may error. Parang yung validity check, parang ano siya, um, uh, you determined by how correct something is. Do you get that? Parang, um, when something is valid, it means that it is of quality and matches up with facts, ganon. So, validity helps you provide accurate information, conclusions, and measurements, ganon. Next is check digits. I don't have to go on full details kasi I already explained this earlier. So, yun nga, check digits. This is control, identify keystrokes error in key field by testing the internal validity of the codes. Record interrogation. Record interrogation procedures validate the entire record by examining the interrelationship of its field values. So, we have three. Oops. So, ito yung parang mga test. So, we have three tests here. First is the reasonableness check. So, determine if a value in one field which has already passed a limit check and range check is reasonable when considered along with other data fields in the record. So, parang yung kanina, parang pinagsama siya na limit and check and range check. So, parang for me, para siyang test to determine whether a value confirms with specified criteria, ganun. So, for me, yung reasonableness check, this can be used to eliminate questionable data points from subsequent processing. So, ayun, um, meron kang employee and let's say, nag-earn siya ng 1,000 per day. And then, ayan. So, 1,000 per day. So, nasa acceptable range mo naman siya. So, okay yun. But then, parang iti-check mo din siya kung tama ba siya sa code, sa parang, um, kung tama ba yung data, tsaka yung same ba sila ng data fields, tsaka yung record. So, for example, kung yung employee mo na yun na nag-earn 1,000 per day, pagka yung parang yung skill position niya, let's just say skill position niya is mababa lang, then mapapaisip ka, masyadong mataas yung 1K for his job. Ayun. Yun parang madaling example. So, sign checks. Okay. These are tests to see if the sign of a field is correct for the type of record being processed. Again, process. So, yung pinaprocess na transaction files should be sorted the same way ng oops, I got it wrong. Parang ito pala yung para siyang test na para makita if yung sign ba is aligned sa field or type ng record na ayun, na being processed. Sequence check. Sequence check. These are used to determine if a record is out of order. In batch systems that use sequential master files, the transaction files being processed must be sorted in the same order as the primary keys of the corresponding master file. So, yung pinaprocess na transaction file should be sorted the same way ng primary keys ng master field. So, this is important sa processing ng update program. So, para sa akin, um, this is a test of list of items or files of records um, for correct ascending or descending sequence ba based on the item or key field in the records. Ayon. So, para siyang verification that is performed to help ensure that data is or properly ordered. Next is file interrogation. The purpose of The purpose of file interrogation is to ensure that the correct file is being processed by the system. So these controls are particularly important for master files, which contain permanent records of the firm and which, if destroyed or corrupted, are difficult to replace. So, bali parang ano siya. So, ayun nga, yung file interrogation, parang ginagamit siya para mas kasigurado na tama yung file na pinaprocess ng system. So, important to sa mga master files kasi yung master files, diba, nandun yung mga permanent records ng firm. So, pag nasira yun, or like, let's say, mawala, mahirap siyang mapalitan. So, we have 3 file interrogation types. So, this is the internal label checks, version checks, tsaka expiration date check. Internal label check. Internal label checks verify that the file process is the one the program is actually calling for. Files stored on magnetic tapes are usually kept offline in a tape library. These files have external labels that identify them to the tape librarian and operator. To ensure that the correct file is about to be processed, the system matches the file name and serial number in the header label with the program's file requirements. So, ayun nga. Parang ano siya. Yung file na nakalagay sa magnetic tape. Yung magnetic tape, para siyang itsura niya. I'm not sure, but when I search it up, ang nakita ko kasi is like, para siyang cassette. Yung may tape sa loob, tapos like, you have to turn it to like, play it. Ayun. I don't know. Pero yun yung magnetic tape na nakita ko. So, ano siya? Wait for the mic. So, ayun nga siya. Yung ganun yung itsura niya. So, yung mga files is nandun siya sa magnetic field. Tapos, yung magnetic field, yung magnetic tape. Yung magnetic tape naman, meron naman siyang external labels para ma-identify sila ng tape librarian or ng operator o kung sino man yung gagamit. Which is authorized lang yung pwede gumamit. So, na-identify siya or yung label niya is naka-identify by name tsaka serial number. So, yung external labeling, this is a manual procedure. So, ibig sabihin, pag manual task, lapitin siya sa errors. So, syempre, hindi na iiwasan na magkaroon ng wrong labeling. So, mali yung label na nalagay mo. Ganon. Pagka nangyari yun, like for example, nagkaroon ng file na mali yung label, tas kailangan yung kunin or like gagamitin yun. Pagka nakuha na yung file na yun, mali yung file na nasa loob ng magnetic tape. Ayun, mali yung file na nasa loob ng magnetic tape. So, syempre, we don't know. This may result in the destruction or corruption ng company. So, para maiwasan yon, yung operating system, nag-create siya ng internal header label para, nag-create siya ng internal header label tapos nakalagay siya sa parang beginning ng file. Ito yung parang yung label. So, meron diyang tape serial number. Ayun o, nakalagay dyan. Tapos may file name din. Tapos may expiration date. I-explain ko yan later. Control totals. Tapos may number of records. Ito na yung files na nasa loob. So, para ma-ensure na tama yung file na like gagamitin talaga, 'di ba ang sabi diyan, sa beginning siya ilalagay. So, pagka yung system, ima-match niya muna yung file name tsaka yung serial number na nandun sa header na label ng header label. So, pagka mali yung file na na-load or like yung file na nandun sa loob, yung system magsisend siya ng message sa operator, tas parang ika-cancel niya na yung processing. Ayun, yun yung internal label checks. So, dapat magma-match yung external labeling sa internal labeling. Next is version checks are used to verify that the version of the file being processed is correct. Ayun, sa version checks naman, wait, do I have it? Okay. Sa version checks naman, ang ginagamit naman to para ma-verify ba kung yung version ba ng file na ipaprocess mo is tama. So, ayun. So, sa parang like sa parent-child approach, maraming version ng master files tsaka transaction yung nag-i-exist. So, para like makasiguro ka, i-check mo yung version number sa file na parang ipaprocess mo or yung file na nandun sa requirement. So, pagka parehas, you can use it. Pero pagka iba, then, no, you can't. Next is expiration dates. Prevents a file from being deleted before it expires. To protect against destroying an active file by mistake, the system first checks the expiration date contained in the header label. If the retention period has not yet expired, the system will generate an error message on abort the scratch procedure. So, yung expiration date check naman, nagpe-prevent naman siya ng file na ma-delete bago pa siya ma-expire. So, for example, merong like number ng backup files na nagawa. So, yung pinakang luma na backup file, isa-scratch na siya. Ibig sabihin, i-erase na siya sa tape na yon. Para, pag na-erase na siya, magkakaroon na ng like, new spaces para sa new files. So, parang ito yung process niya. Ayan. So, ayun, para to avoid the, mistakenly deleting an active file, unang gagawin is yung system, ito-check niya ba yung expiration date. Let's go back. Ito, ayan, yung expiration date. So, ito-check niya yung expiration date na nandun sa header label. If yung retention period hindi pa siya na-expired, then yung system, magbibigay siya ng message na yun nga hindi pa na-expired tapos hindi ika-cancel niya na yung scratch procedure. So ayun, so yung length ng retention period naka-specified siya sa programmer. Tsaka based din sa number ng backup files na gusto natin. So kung yung programmer hindi siya naglagay ng expiration date, then may malaking chance na magkakaroon talaga na accidental deletion. Ayun. I think that's all. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.